Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. I hope you guys have a wonderful sessions going on so far, and it's been a great conference. Uh, First off, I apologize for the delay because we had some technical issues, and thanks to Kunal for helping with the issues to fix them. So in this session, I'm going to talk about Azure AD conditional access, which is your first step towards zero trust model. If you're looking at securing your endpoints or securing your infrastructure services that you provide to your end users, especially in the days of the COVID-19, when everybody's working from home and we are rapidly, spinning up the new services for our end users, just an example, Teams or other collaboration tools to make sure our users can work. In this session, I'm just going to talk about your very first step that you can take to drive zero trust model to make sure that your end users are productive while they're working from anywhere, from any device, and you have your security controls around those solutions or the products that your end users are leveraging. First of first, so this conference is brought to you by Microsoft Collaboration Conference. Previously, it was known as SharePoint Conference, and unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 situation, this year's SharePoint Conference, and as I said, the new name is Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference, is rescheduled for next year. And last but not the least, thanks to our sponsors who actually helped us to make this event successful for you guys and make sure that we can deliver you the services. These are our sponsors for these event that work with us to make sure we can deliver this event to you guys virtually and making every single opportunity that's available to make this event successful. So first thing first, who I am and what I'm going to talk about, right? I'm actually a cloud architect and a security advisor. I have been working in the IT industry for the last probably 15 years now with a focus on the Microsoft technologies and the cybersecurity solutions. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a Microsoft certified trainer. Along with that, I do have some third-party organization certifications as well, like CISSP is one of those. I love to speak in the community. I'm a speaker, I'm a blogger. I love to blog on my blog as well to share my thoughts around technology, security, and journal life experience as well. You have my Twitter and my blog URL as well. In case if you guys want to follow me or reach out to me, you guys are welcome to reach out to me via Twitter or via my blog post as well. So what we are going to talk about. So first thing is the agenda, right? What our agenda is going to look like. We are going to talk about, what is zero trust? Why we are talking about that, right? Or why we need to have a zero trust infrastructure or zero trust network in our organization. What are the tools that are available to drive zero trust implementation? Again, um, there's no technology that says, or there's no vendor that can come to you say, oh, we have this solution that you can use to have zero trust implementation. Zero trust is more of a mindset, but there are tools available that help you to achieve that particular mindset and go towards the direction to have those solutions implemented. And then we will look at how Azure Active Directory or the conditional access policies in Azure help you to drive your or have you to have a very first step towards zero trust implementation. And then we will look at a zero trust model implementation from a Microsoft standpoint. And last but not the least, we will look at the conclusion or our action items that we need to have in order for us to take back to our organization and drive value with the products or the tools that we have available. So before we jump into this zero trust and the overview of what zero trust is, how it works, and all those type of things, let's look at the history first, right? So in the past, back in 1990s, right, we have every single user working from office, right? We have an office network. We have the users coming to the office. They are working on a PC, right, connected to your local area network. Everything was behind the firewall. So your security parameter was literally your firewall or your egress endpoints, right? There was no concept of working from anywhere or remote workforce type of things, and there was no BYOD concept as well. So literally users coming to the office, or we have VPNs and those type of things, they work from the office. So your security parameter was your DMZ or your firewalls. Now with the passage of time, right, when we look at our traditional model where the users were working, it was all behind a firewall. And that firewall can be, at your egress or your DMZ zone. And the organizations, they were adopting the VPNs connectivity to have a connections between two different office locations, or allowing the users to connect from one branch office to the head office or the corporate office. So it was all, behind one single firewall or a firewall solution. So if we look at it in the history, when we have to drive the security controls, we were looking at deploying the firewalls, configuring the inbound outbound rules to allow specific traffic and decline specific traffic as well, based on the source and the destination or the port or the applications. But this has changed with the passage of time, especially when it comes to these, corporate application, the SaaS providers. Now we allow our users to work from anywhere. They work from home, they work from coffee shop, they work from from the I would say railway track. They're working from anywhere, from their mobile phone, their personal laptops, corporate laptops. They are using SaaS services like Office 365 is one of the big example, right? We use Office 365 on a daily basis, or Microsoft 365. There are other applications like Google Docs or Box.com, right? Or you have other IoT devices or the partner organizations that you collaborate with. So your security boundary is no longer the perimeter network where you have a firewall, because there's a lot more traffic, a lot more communication that's happening outside of your security boundary, right? If I'm using Office 365 from my home, my traffic is not coming to my corporate network, so you can have the visibility of what's going on. I'm directly connected with a SaaS application, sending and receiving the email communication, or I'm actually uploading or downloading the content to OneDrive or SharePoint Online or the other services that we use. And the same way, I'm actually communicating with a partner organization, sharing the documents with a partner organization, working on the documents on the partner organization side. So we need to think about the new security controls that we need to have in order for us to make sure, that meet our modern application requirements, while ensuring that our users are not impacted when it comes to the services. And we need to make sure that our users are productive all the time so that we can stay competitive in the market as well. So there are some assumptions that we have all the time, and then there's a reality as well, right? We always assume that our users are our employees, but what's the reality on that? The reality is our employees are no longer the users. We have contractors, we have third-party vendors, we have our customers, or we have our partners as well that leverage our services, or they use our services to work for us, to help us drive innovation in our solutions or in our products that we are selling in the market, right? So in the past, like, your employees are your users, that's no longer the reality, or that's no longer the assumption as of today. But now the reality is you have employees, third-party contractors, and everybody using your services. Then in the past, as you know, that we used to have just corporate managed devices, corporate on laptop or corporate on workstation that users are using to work on a daily basis. But now more and more organizations are going towards bring your own device. On average, every user actually have at least two BYOD devices, mobile phone or personal laptop, right? So corporate organizations, they do allow the users to bring in their personal devices or BYOD to work for the corporate, right? And to get the job done, because the focus is now changed from a corporate on resources to a delivery of their services, right? So the users are bringing their own devices to deliver the work as well. Then again, legacy, you have on-premises applications, on-prem Exchange Server, SharePoint, or Link, or back in the days, OCS, right? On-prem applications deployed that are serving your users, but now we are rapidly transitioning to the cloud application, SaaS vendors or platform as a services or IaaS as well, to deploy our applications in the cloud. So that's a new reality as well, where we are living right now. And then corporate network and firewalls were enough for us to secure our networks, right? And to secure our communication and secure our application and data. But that's not true anymore. We need to expand our perimeter network to cover the SaaS applications or the external vector as well that we have in our organization today. And the last one is, in the past, we just do like, local packet tracing, or to look at the logs on the servers or the services, and we are done. But now you have a lot more sources available that provides you the signals. Like, just an example, Office 365, you have multiple services there. Then you do use probably a third Azure in your infrastructure, right, for DR purpose, or you do use Azure for backup or other services. That does provide you a lot more information about your users' traffic. So your boundaries are no longer your corporate network. You actually have the cloud and the cloud services. So you need to cover all those aspects when it comes to the security of your infrastructure services and your data. So this is just a highlight of what few reports that I read. Actually, they provided this information is, you have probably 5.2 mobile app business applications that are accessed by employees, and it's actually 5.2 billion. So which means that on average, our users on a mobile phone, they are accessing roughly like 6 applications on their personal phone, which belongs to their organization. Again, BYOD scenario, right? 94% of the organizations are using cloud services, right? And now I do get the answer of, "Oh, we don't use cloud services, but somehow you do have cloud services deployed within your organization. Probably it can be in the form of a antivirus solution, right? Just an example is Microsoft Defender ATP, or you're using Symantec or Bluehost proxy or other solutions that are connected to the cloud, or you're using a cloud backup services for your business continuity requirements. So 94% of the organization, as per the report, and I can share the references for those reports as well, that says that organizations are currently using cloud. And then we have 7 billion plus internet connected devices. When we talk about IoT, we look at the devices, and again, every single device connected to the internet. This report is actually from 2018 that says 7 billion internet connected devices. So we can look at the growth and all the stuff, and we can actually talk about how quickly or how we're expanding from a connectivity perspective and the footprint that we have. And the last and the most important one is the BYRD programs. 60% of the organizations, they now have a formally BYRD program, which means they do have a documented policies and the procedures, how they are going to allow BYRD devices, how they are going to allow the users to have access to the corporate network from BYRD, and how the security and the information protection will be performed on the BYRD devices, right? So again, they allow BYOD based on their own business scenarios to help the end users to be empowered to do anything from anywhere, while ensuring that they're not relying on the corporate assets only, right? They're not relying on the corporate laptop to get connected to the network to do the job. So on paper, that looks great, but the other side is we do not have control on the BYOD device because that's the personal device to the user. So that's why we need to have a documented procedures of what level of controls we can have. And that actually drives another conversation around compliance of how much control you can have on your employee's personal device. Now, all these circumstances that I just talked about, especially the BYOD and the IoT scenarios, right? What we need to cover all these scenarios, right? We definitely need a modern approach because the legacy approach of perimeter-based security is not enough. What our modern approach is going to be to ensure that we have a secure access to the resources for our employees, and we do have a visibility of what level of access or what the activities are being performed by the users, right? So a modern approach is a necessity for us nowadays to make sure our users are productive and secure as well. So before I jump into the modern approach of like zero trust or why the zero trust term, right? Let's look at the history of the zero trust, right? From where here zero trust started and you know how that term became more popular back in 2015 to onward, right? So the concept of the zero trust has been present in the cybersecurity since before the term zero trust was coined, right? The Defense Information System Agency and the Department of Defense, they published their work on a more secure enterprise strategy that was dubbed Black Core in the back in the days. Black Core involved moving from a perimeter-based security model to one that focused on the security of individual transactions, where they were recommending that we verify each and every single transaction that's being performed versus we have a perimeter-based security to just allow or decline, incoming or outgoing traffic. The work of Jericho, right? Jericho Forum in 1994, it was actually publicized the idea of deperimeterization, which limit implicit trust based on a network location, and the limitation of relying on single or static defense over a large network segment. The concept of deperimeterization, evolved and improved into the large concept of zero trust, which was later coined by John Weiler Forrester, right, back in 2010. And then zero trust then became the term used to describe various cybersecurity solutions that move security away from implied trust based on the network location, and instead it focused on evaluating the trust on a per transaction basis. Both private industry and then the other government and the higher education industry as well, they have also undergone this evolution from perimeter based security to a security strategy based on a zero trust principle. The zero trust idea has been evolving for a long time, right? It's not something that's coming up in the last 10 years or 15 years. It's been there from early 90s as well, but it got a boost back in 2010 when, Forrester actually referred this as a zero trust as a term. And then as you can see in the graph as well, after 2014, based on the BYOD devices and these remote workforce scenarios coming in more and more, this term became a hype and the users start focused on that from a cybersecurity perspective. Now, what is zero trust, right? Is it a term? Is it a solution? Or what it is, right? So the zero trust, a very simple definition, that I can refer as is, it's an approach to the security which actually treats access attempt, any access attempt, right? Or I would say every single access attempt. And that access attempt will be considered as a request coming in from an untrusted network. Because in the modern era that we live in today, your cloud application and the mobile workforce have redefined your security parameters, where employees are bringing their BYOD devices, as we talked about earlier. Employees are working from home or working remotely, especially in this COVID-19 situation that we are in right now. And then data is being accessed outside of the corporate network, and it's being shared with external parties. External parties could be your business partners, contractors, or vendors as well. And then your corporate data and applications are moving from on-prem to the hybrid or cloud-based environments, right? You guys are probably migrating your applications from your on-premises servers to the cloud-based services, IaaS or PaaS, or switching completely to the SaaS offerings as well. The new parameter is not defined by the physical location of your organization. It actually extends to every access point that hosts, stores, or access corporate resources and services. Interactions with the corporate resources and services now often bypassing on-premises perimeter-based security. Just to use example, Office 365 is access from home network. My authentication request or any of my requests is not going through the on-prem network or on-prem firewall. So there's no visibility from a security perspective of how the Riaz information was accessed or what the activities were being done when the information was accessed. So zero trust, as I said earlier, it's not a solution, right? When I say solution, like I cannot just say that here's the product that you take it, deploy it, and you have zero trust, right? It's more of a mindset where the biggest benefit of the zero trust is you need to change the mindset, right? You need to verify every single request that is coming into your network, and you need to have an approach to the security where you treat every single request like it's coming from untrusted network, or you assume that, oh, we have a breach, then what will be my strategy, right? You are not trusting that, oh, Riaz is authenticating or a user X is authenticating from this network and it's a valid user. You explicitly verify every single request and make appropriate actions based on the location and the trust and everything that you are getting from the user's point of view, and then make a decision whether the users can access or the access can be restricted or you want to have additional layer of controls as well. Zero trust mindset, as I said, is you assume that you have everything which is available on the open internet, right? Whether it's your in-house application that's deployed on your on-premises servers or it's your cloud-based applications, right? You just have a mindset that says that, everything that's in your organization is on the open internet. There's no question around, what can be on the internet or I'm protected for this application. Second one is you do not trust on single source. The best example that I usually use with my customers as well is I'm not going to trust your username and password only, right? I'm not going to trust your device health only. I'm not going to trust your network location only, right? So you do not trust one parameter to make a decision, right? You have additional layer of controls, so which you can leverage to make a decision, right? And the last one is breach containment. As I said, it's a mindset. You always have a mindset of like, what if we have a breach? How do I, contain the information that I need to protect, right? What will be my strategy to contain the data? So you always have that mindset to protect your resources, your assets, and your data in Office 365 or any cloud or your on-prem applications as well. So let's look at the principles of the zero trust. From a Microsoft perspective, today, again, that's true for everybody when it comes to zero trust because there's a mindset versus a technology. But what we do is, from a zero trust perspective, we verify every single request explicitly, no exceptions, right? Because organizations, they need to be able to provide secure access to their resources, regardless of a user or application environment, right? If I'm able to access my corporate resources, then I can be productive. If the security is going to block every single access for me, and I have to go to the different routes to get access, I will not be productive, and this is not going to be beneficial for the organization as well, right? So before you allow a secure access to your users, we want to access a user's location, right, from where the user is trying to access, and this is based on the IP locations. And then the role in the organization, the health of the user device from where he or she is trying to access, whether the device is healthy or whether the device has a malware or some bad items, right? And then the type of service and the classification of the data that the user is trying to access, right? So we verify every single request explicitly before we allow, restrict, or we have a limited access for the user. Then the second one, which is the most important one, principle of least privilege. We need to make sure that we have a limited access for the users, or I would say need to know whatever the user needs to know, they have that limited access, right? From a zero trust perspective. The traditional perimeter-based network defense is obsolete. Or in the past, just like we used to have one admin or two admins, and they are actually working on that. Now we need to eliminate that concept, and we need to go more towards with the least privilege access or need to know access as well. And the last and the most important one is we always need to assume that there's a breach, right? When there's a breach, again, what you are going to do. So that will minimize your blast radius for breaches and prevent your lateral movements by segmentation access by network, user device, and application awareness. You need to verify all the sessions are encrypted at minimum, right? We want to have end-to-end encryption in place for all our sessions. And then we need to have a analytics to get the visibility and drive threat detection and improve our defense as well. So this assume breach mindset will help you achieve those. Now, in a zero trust model, as I said, every single request is verified implicitly, right? Where we look for a strong authentication and authorization policies. From where those strong authentication and policies comes in from a Microsoft standpoint, you can leverage Azure Active Directory to enforce the conditional access policies. Like with the conditional access policies, you can restrict the access based on location, right? You can enforce the strong authentication with an Azure MFA as well to have a second factor authentication. And then you actually have everything from a user identity to the application hosting environment. You prevent the breach because you restrict the access, you define the least privileged access, and then you actually take actions accordingly. And then this micro segmentation or least privileged access will help you minimize the lateral movement path. Just an example is if I need to have access to a certain folder, I just need to have a read-only access. So I should be given a read-only access versus a full honor access to the SharePoint side, right? So this will help minimize the lateral movement path, and the principle of least privilege will help you to reduce your risk factor and exposure for the organization as well. And the last and the most important one is, again, all those controls are in place. You have least privilege access in place. Do you have the visibility? Do you have the analytics to make intelligent decisions, right? And this all happens in the zero trust model, right? You actually need to have the analytics on your actual user transactions access requirements and everything, so that you can make your intelligent decisions to keep up to date with the security and make sure your organization is protected from current and upcoming threats as well. And then from a Microsoft perspective, when you drive your zero trust implementation or when you're looking at, within your organization, you actually have a maturity model available. Microsoft defined that maturity model as a three-phased approach, right? Where you actually have a traditional infrastructure, then you have an advanced, and the last one is, and the most important one is the optimal one, right? So when we look at the traditional infrastructure, we look at, we have our existing controls, existing tool sets deployed to give you the, protection that we need. Again, within the traditional controls as well, you can have some policies like role-based access control defined. You can restrict the user's access based on the locations. And in advance, you add some level of automation, right? Just an example is the Azure AD conditional access policies, which automatically evaluate every single request coming in and then making a decision, right? And then in the optimal state, you are looking at actually adding more automation and have more analytics and more, you are going more towards the passwordless authentication, right? So you are not no longer relying on the factors that can be compromised like a user password. So what are the tools that can help you to drive the zero trust? As I said earlier, the tools are not something that I can just sell you to say, hey, these are tools that you can use to do this work. The tools, when I talk about that, it's more around the technology factor, right? On what you need to do, right? So as you actually begin to assess your zero trust readiness and begin to plan on the changes to improve your protection across your identities, your devices, right? Your application, your corporate data or the information, then your infrastructure and the networks, you need to consider these investments, to help drive your zero trust implementation. So these are the tools that I actually listed based on my experience and the capabilities that I would say every single customer needs to have. Number one, you need to have a strong authentication, right? You need to ensure that a strong authentication is in place, like multi-factor authentication at minimum, and you have a session-based risk detections as the backbone of your access strategy to minimize the risk of identity compromise. Because again, user credentials can be compromised, and somehow negligence from the user perspective, the strong authentication like the password and the MFA can be compromised, but you need to have a system in place that detects the users and behavior and then make a decision based on the user's behavior as well in case there's an identity compromise, right? Then the second one is you need to have a policy-based adaptive access, right? What it does, it defines the acceptable access policies for your resources and enforce them with a consistent security policy engine. Just an example is the Azure AD, and it's leveraging the machine learning algorithms behind the scene that provides you both governance and insights into the variance, right? And then we look at the micro segmentation, or I would say the least privileged access, right? Where you move beyond a simple centralized network-based parameter to comprehensive and distributed segmentation using software-defined micro parameters, right? Based on your resources and everything, you actually define the policies to have micro segmentation. And then we look at the automation where we actually invest in the automated alerts, right? Just an example is you probably look at your SIM solution or source solutions today or your endpoint security solutions to give you the alerts and then perform the remediation to reduce your mean time to respond for the attacks, right? And then the next one is the intelligence and the AI, right? Because again, we have a growing data, which is growing on a daily basis with like I would say an exponential rate, right? So we need to leverage intelligence and we need to have an AI in place, like using a cloud-based intelligence and available signals so that we can detect and respond to the access anomalies in a real time. As an individual, if I do not have a AI or the intelligence with me, or I would say system-based that can process millions of requests within an hour or so, then it's not possible being a human that we can actually look at every single activities and then define the anomalies and or I would say detect the anomalies at minimum, right? We need to have a compute power in the system, built-in intelligence that we need to leverage, like a cloud-based intelligence that can give us the insights into the user's activities and that can detect the behavior anomalies as well and then raise the flag. And the last and the most important one is your data classification and the protection. We have data that is growing on a daily basis, right? And that data is being shared internally, externally, and with the business partners as well. Um, that data can contain sensitive information in terms of, like, from a compliance perspective, it could be PII, PCI, or HIPAA, or whatever the compliance regulations that your organization is following. How do we protect that data? We need to define our data classification strategy to see what data is important for us as an organization and what data is not important. What will be the impact if we have a data breach, right? Because now the data is a new reality and it's a sweet spot for the bad actors to get in and get the data of the organization. So we need to define our data classification, and once you have a data classification scheme defined, right, what is important and what is confidential for the organization, then we need to define the level of protection on top of that. If it's confidential, do we want users to have full access to this data, or we want to restrict their access based on their location or based on the information that we have about the users, right? So driving your data classification protection is a very important step when you're looking at your zero trust roadmap for your organization. So this diagram is just on a very high level, a zero trust architecture from a Microsoft perspective that I have it for you guys, where I'm showing you, like, you have users identities, you have user devices, right? And you're feeding that information to a security policy enforcement engine, right? That has organization policies defined. Just an example is organization policy could be user requests is coming from outside of the corporate network, right? And the user is using a corporate device. And then you just enforce the users to have go through the MFA process and then have users to have access to the application or the data or the infrastructure services. Or you can have some other controls as well, like users coming from an unmanaged device or the BYOD device, and users coming from a location which is already classified from a threat intel perspective that is risky. You can define the user's access to restrict their access. And again, if this happens with a human, right, that they need to look at every single request and make a decision, we will have a lot of user issues where the users are not able to get the job done. So an automated centralized system with the help of a machine learning and AI, we have this power to make those decisions quickly to make sure our users are productive and they have the ability to do their job in a timely manner as well. Now let's look at the zero trust model and from a user access perspective and see how it works, right? So I actually have this information, like you have a information that's being submitted to your security policy engine that has your organization policies, and it's continuously evaluating the user risk, right? And consider this security policy engine as an Azure Active Directory backbone on the back end, where you have your users information, the user risk information, you have your conditional access policies configured based on certain criteria. You are allowing the access for the user, you are restricting the access with your session policies, and then you are blocking the access based on a certain criteria as well. The security policy engine is actually, remediating that users and the devices risk as well. Just an example is, you know, if the user risk is medium, you're enforcing the user to go through the MFA and then have a user to probably have a limited access to sensitive data, or the users can have a full access to the data. So that decision engine, centralized decision engine, is the core for your organizational zero trust strategy, and it's all focused on your secure authentication mechanisms as well. So here's the in detail representation of this solution. You have conditional access policies configured for your Azure Active Directory or your B2B users, and you are actually getting the signals again as part of the Microsoft threat intelligence information from a ISG graph as well. You have your user threat and risk signals, which are being fed into the Azure Active Directory, like, Azure ATP for on-prem cloud app security is coming in. You're using Hello for Business or the Azure MFA, then Azure AD identity protection, which is continuously checking for your leak credentials to make sure that users are not compromised, right? And then you have the device information is coming in. You have the partner MDM solutions, or you can use Microsoft Intune to manage those devices and report back to your centralized identity platform. Then your Azure conditional access policies are being evaluated based on the configuration that you actually have, and that changed the in the posture like Azure AD identity protection signals. If the user is being compromised and his credentials are available on the dark web, you actually enforce the users to take certain actions, right? Just an example is leak credentials, and I had that is you require the user to go through the MFA process. Number one, the reason is you make sure that if the user is compromised, the bad actor is not going through the process to just reset a password, right? So you ask the user to go through the MFA process first and then reset a password before he or she can access the resources, right? And then if the user is good, right, you actually define the policies or access for the users to the certain applications, right? It based on the risk factors. All this decision making is being done by the conditional access, which leverage the backend machine learning and the artificial intelligence from Microsoft as well. Now, this covers everything that I wanted to cover for this particular topic today. I just have a few next steps that I wanted you guys to look at in your organization when you go, guys, wrap up your day today. So the very first thing is assess your infrastructure for zero trust. It does not require you to have a significant amount of, investments. Look at what tools and technologies are available to you today and start with that, right? You do not need to acquire a bunch of products or licensing or those type of things. Start with what you guys have. I can share the details of the Microsoft Zero Trust Maturity model as well. And when you look at a traditional model, it does have a lot of things that you can do in your organization without acquiring anything, right? And the same go with the next phase as well. Then again, first step, you need to have strong authentication or identity and access management, right? Username and password is no longer enough. You need to have strong authentication and you need to have a second factor authentication in place, right? Block basic authentication. Regardless of the controls that you have, if you are still allowing the basic authentication or the legacy protocols, you are actually setting it up for the bad actors to get in using the old protocols, right? So make sure you are using the modern authentication or OAuth on the back end. That helps you to make sure all your communication and the traffic flow is secure. Eliminate your weak passwords. Define your password policies. You can actually use the features in the Azure Active Directory as well for your password protection to eliminate your weak passwords in the organization. And again, you can eliminate your weak passwords quickly, but end state or the target state that you can probably look at is to move towards a passwordless authentication in your organization. And the last one is deploy MFA across all your users. No exception, right? One single compromised user can have a significant impact to your organization. So you should have MFA deployed across the board for every single user. With that being said, it's all that I wanted to cover for today. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask me. And I just have my information in case if you guys want to reach out to me on via Twitter or via my blog post as well.